Want to make movies? Hey there, aspiring filmmakers. You're the new Hollywood generation. My name is Orlando Delbert. This is Hollywood Unapologetic. I first wrote about success in filmmaking and life when I was writing Pollyanna's tear-soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical. Today I wanted to speak about Filmmaking Essentials, 9 things you will need to do and be mindful of to be successful during the post-production stage of film production during the coronavirus pandemic. For you, the new Hollywood generation, this directly applies to you. If you haven't watched Filmmaking Essentials Reopening Hollywood, I'll have a link at the end of this episode for you to check out. And since the Hollywood Task Force released its white papers on reopening Hollywood, follow the link in the description for the downloadable PDF. I've been asked via Twitter, what is the film production process during the coronavirus pandemic? This is a common question, and I wanted to address it in the Reopening Hollywood series. But I should add, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers who shared the long-anticipated document on proposed procedures, proposed health and safety guidelines for motion picture, television, and streaming productions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Whew, that's a hell of a title. The white papers, the next steps we speak about here, would be the steps everyone should follow in the filmmaking process with their proposed guidelines in mind. I have to mention up front, there is thought to creating our vision. Most of the steps for motion picture and for television are the same in the most part, but distribution is different. Plus, with the growing availability of digital and self-distribution outlets online, and with the growing popularity of crowdfunding, there's multiple ways to get your vision financed and your voice heard. I offer these episodes to give you more in-depth information, all in the hopes to help you make your checklist of things you need to have in order before you pick up your camera and shoot a single frame. The 4th stage in the film production process is the post-production stage. This is where all of the media that was captured is assembled and edited together. Probably the best way to look at this stage of the filmmaking process is to think of your film as being a huge puzzle with thousands of integral parts that make up the completed story. At this stage, it is easier to see the many pieces because there is a convergence of everything shot and everything has a representative scene and take number. For many productions, this is the most time-consuming and costly part of the production process. The reason being, professionals getting paid a high rate are doing most of what is needed during this stage. Most facilities have a high overhead, and these same individuals are using the very best and fastest computers and networks being used in the industry. There are a lot of resources needed to keep a facility open. Operational costs are high because they need to cover existing infrastructure and networks, ensure connectivity never fails, computers stay cool, and their talent is being paid their rates. Facilities will most likely be renting most, if not all, of the computer equipment. This is very expensive, especially when the maintenance and proprietary software fees are included. And unlike the earlier stages of production, many of the ones that actually handle the moving parts of the assembly process and effects may have extensive schooling and some experience already in the production process. It is very rare that someone wanting to get into visual effects or picture cutting would have the opportunity to work on a Flame or Inferno upon getting their first job at an effects or editorial house. They would have most likely have been runners who are much like production assistants during the production stage, and they would handle the heavy lifting of operations at any given facility. It is not at all uncommon for a runner to be making deliveries of tapes and other types of grunt work for a year and a half, if not longer, before having the opportunity to sit at $1 million workstation in the middle of the night for the very first time. Normally, I would have said this next one is the very first thing to do during the post-production stage because of its importance, and that is to remember to stay calm and breathe. If you're not overwhelmed by now, you most likely will be. A feature film can have hundreds of shots, all with multiple takes, that have to be gone over one by one. Even shooting segments for a television show could have hundreds of clips to go through. I've seen so many times footage delivered with poor logging, if the shots are logged at all. When this happens, some productions will hire several editorial assistants to go over and sometimes digitize all of the footage into a nonlinear editing system, usually at a low resolution, before sifting through the shots. This falls under the offline editorial part of post-production. This often is a very time-extensive and costly process, which for the most part could have been avoided if someone was keeping tabs on the shots as they went along. Keep your head together and track as much as you can as you go along. Do your best to get comfortable with the behemoth. Before going any further, you should know that post-production has many processes that fall under this title. This includes the intake, processing, and sweetening of production sound. Additional audio components such as automated dialogue replacement, design audio effects, Foley, and music are then added. Special digital visual effects, including three-dimensional elements and scenes, compositing, match moving and wire removal, film titles, and elements from the graphics digital toolkit for television, and the end crawl are done during the stage. When shooting on film, the process of developing the film and then digitizing for digital intermediate also falls under post-production. Digital intermediate allows sophisticated color correction tools, unparalleled control over film color. Color, contrast, and brightness in different parts of the frame can be changed over time, timed separately, and in real time. Scanning film and printing it back to celluloid in the laboratory is also part of post-production. Working offline and EDL. As I just mentioned, often an assistant editor will digitize the raw footage into a nonlinear editing system for editing. The offline editor or editors will begin assembling, often doing a string-out edit. A string-out edit is following the shots captured in the log during production and placing them in a timeline back to back. This allows the picture cutter to see what shots work best with one another for each scene, as well as see which shots from different camera angles can be included to make the scene work better. Think of it as giving the editor a visual toolkit of everything for that particular scene that he or her can move around to make the scene flow. As the edits are coming together, an edit decision list is generated. The edit decision list is an extension of the logs that were made during production. Great thing about this process is that the edit decision list contains all of the reel information and associated time code representing each clip. This process saves a lot of time and effort towards the final edit. An autoconform can run on an online editing system which digitizes only the shots needed for assembly in high resolution. Once everything has been digitized and is approved, then it is ready for digital intermediate. I should add, digital intermediate takes longer and at the moment still more expensive than traditional film timing in a laboratory, but prices are coming down. One major advantage to consider is since your film is in a digital format, greater options are readily available. In addition to what I've already mentioned before about digital intermediate regarding the ease of adjusting color, contrast, and brightness changes in real time, you now have the ability to also remove unwanted elements somewhat easily from shots. Plus, the combined prices for film and video timing, your fade and dissolves that fall under optical effects, and titles usually cost about the same as full digital finish. Do your best to be smart and on schedule. I can't tell you how many times I've worked on projects that just don't seem to end. Oftentimes, this will run into budget overages and possible deadlines missed. More times than not, this occurs when the director doesn't really know what he or she may want or his ego is in the way. Inexperienced director will tweak things to death before he wants it to be perfect. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting your edits to be just right, but too many times you just have to stop and move on. One of the positive things about working broadcast television is that you are forced to work within a definitive amount of time. You work diligently to get your first pass completed and then go back and do as much tweaking as you possibly can before delivery. I've worked on thousands of episodes of live television and live-to-tape programming to learn you have to make your deadlines, period. Film often doesn't have the same time restraints, but one needs to make a decision when done enough is done. Oh, here comes the pixel fucking. If you are creating content for a client, you will be under the scrutiny of the client and his or her people. When dealing with big productions and with studios, there usually is an entourage of a dozen or more people that show up to review your work. It's not a big deal and of course within a client's right to be there, but I'll tell you, dealing with the committee is a tiresome process in itself. More times than not, they'll have you nudging things around your screen a pixel away from where it was, change a color in a bar or graphic only slightly, or move a clip a frame or two in your timeline, only to justify their own jobs. It gets old fast, especially if any or all of them are cooked up. More times than not, you'll end up putting everything back to where it was before they first arrived, and they will love it. It's comical, and you will see this again and again on large projects. Expect all of this to come with a big heaping spoonful of coldly served hubris and self-gratifying compliments to themselves for the work you've done they're taking credit for. Fun times. On small projects, this happens as well, but you're usually dealing with a less experienced client who only knows what they want once they see it. Get ready for lots of revisions. Save all, save often. I know I've already mentioned to stay calm and breathe, and to get comfortable with the behemoth. For this next point, I have to stress again to always remember to be calm. For this next point, some of you may not like what you're about to hear. Depending on what kind of distribution deal you may have to give up to director's edit or director's cut. This is especially true whenever you're dealing with a film studio. Only the very top directors in the world get final cut on some of their theatrical releases and are rarely released to the public theatrically. This is why you often see a director's cut, extended cut, and special edition versions of films when released on DVD or Blu-ray that may have 20 additional minutes or more of the film on the disc. This trend began in the 1980s during the rise of the home video industry as part of originally feeding a small cult fan marketplace. The studio who has invested in your production can insist on changes that they feel will increase the return on their investments. This is all about maximizing their profit, specifically with box office sales. The final cuts are often shorter in length to allow more screenings per day at the theater. Sometimes the studio executives may feel they want a better audience-restricted rating or even a happier ending than found in the director's cut. There are a lot of things that happen during the post-production stage of creating your project. Just like at the very beginning, you need to make your plans, make your list, and do each thing one at a time to ensure everything gets done in the right order and on time. Don't be overwhelmed if you feel you don't know all of the steps. There are others out there that do. Right from the beginning, you began building your team. Everyone in the post-production process is no different. I should add that what I've mentioned here today might have some overlap. It's best to put together these items in order, but as you go through the process, you'll most likely find one of the elements you're working on directly affects something else. Sometimes multiple items are worked on simultaneously. If you're a one-man or one-woman show, it may be a bit difficult to do, but like with anything else, do your best to do one thing at a time and don't let it overwhelm you. Have fun with it. Being part of any film crew, you have to accept it's a very tightly run unit. And as I mentioned throughout the series, we as members of a new Hollywood generation, all in it together. We're all in close proximity of one another. And under normal circumstances, sometimes our lives are at risk while on the clock. Today the risk is higher, and this new way of working and living may be with us for months or even years to come. Be safe, be smart, take it all one day at a time, and don't forget to be great. I'm going to add a link at the very end to the episode, Filmmaking Essentials Reopening Hollywood. If you haven't checked it out, I think you'll dig it. Are you ready for the challenge?